Now, chapters 41 through 50 are all about love and awe slash fear, different levels, different ways that this can be expressed, um, and the meaning of what, what does love mean? What does awe mean? What does fear mean? Fear of God is not fear of punishment, as we've mentioned many times. But what is fear then? We just so instinctually feel that fear is the fear of punishment. That's not Jewish. I mean, I shouldn't say that. It is part of Judaism. There is a concept of fear of punishment. But that's not Hasidus. That's not Tanya. That's not mystical teachings. Mystical teachings doesn't deal with that at all. That is a immature level of your connection to God. Because it's actually not a connection to God. It's only a connection of the fear of the hand of God, but not the fear of God. Right? Your fear of the consequence of God, but not the fear of God. What does it mean, the fear of God? Well, this chapter is going to go into it at great length. But let us begin. So, the Alter Rebbe begins chapter 41 saying that we should constantly bear in mind the beginning of all divine service. So, folks, we're chapter 41, but we're just at the beginning. And what is that? That it's not only the beginning of the divine service, but it's the core. It is the root, just like the root grows into everything, right? And even though we've learned that the concept of fear of God is really to prevent you from disconnecting from God by not doing something that is against God, right? Like speaking ill, lashon hara, speaking ill of another person, that is against the will of God. And when you have the fear of God, then that will prevent you from disconnecting by saying something you shouldn't say, for example, right? Or now Pesach, eating bread on Pesach, the fear of disconnect, and right. Therefore, we refrain through the fear. And love would be the motivator to do good, to do the act of the mitzvah, to eat your mahatzah Pesach, right? By the Seder at least, where it's a mitzvah. To, be charitable, to pray, to learn Torah as we're doing now. So that's usually the way it's divided, love and fear. Love is to bring us to do the positive, and fear is to prevent us from doing the negative, right? The prohibitions. 248 positive commandments, 365 prohibitions of the Torah. However, the Alter Rebbe says no. That is the general term, but we need to first arouse the innate fear that lies hidden in the heart of our soul, our divine soul. And that is that we shouldn't rebel against the King of Kings, God himself. And that fear should manifest itself in the heart, or at least be mindful of it, even though we can't maybe feel it in our heart, but we should be mindful of it. Now, the Alter Rebbe now gives us a contemplation of what the fear is. Again, it's not fear of punishment, right? What it really comes down to, as we will see, it's the fear of being in the presence of God. Sensing the presence of God brings one to fear. Let me give you an example. If, when you were, the example in a boarding school that's an all-male boarding school, and, and all of a sudden a girl walks in, all of a sudden the guys, just check their collar and make sure they're sitting up straight and that they're, how come? It's the fear of the presence of that there's a female in the room, right? You want to make sure you're looking good. It's not the love, right? Because it's the fear of the presence of the person. You don't even have to go that far. When we're alone in a room, we act differently than when there is just another person in the room. Another person in the room, the presence of that person, maybe our feet were on the table, now we took them off because of the presence of that individual. Just the mere presence, not because of that the person might make a comment and say, oh, how uncouth of you. No, Just the mere, that's the consequence of it. But just the mere presence of another individual, we act differently, period. So that's what we're talking about over here. So the Alter Rebbe now gives us a way that we can bring the presence of God into our lives. Because after all, another person we can see. And that is very easy to sense their presence and therefore act, behave differently. So the Alter Rebbe says, though, we can contemplate it in our mind of the greatness of God, of his kingship. How God's kingship, his rulership extends all, not just in this physical world, but of all the spiritual worlds above. Right? He's, not like, back in the day of the Tsar of Russia when a little peddler, was, or a farmer rather, was leaving his little village, which he almost never left, and he traveled 10 kilometers. He says, "Are we still in Russia?" He says, yeah, we're still in Russia. 10 kilometers more, he's traveled. "Are we still in Russia?" "Yeah, we're still in Russia." "Wow, what a mighty and powerful Tsar we have. Look at that. Such a ruler of such a vast land." Right? So God is a much greater ruler than the Tsar of Russia ever was, or any other king. Right? So that's one thing, that he is dominion over all. That inspires a sense of awe. But further, let a person consider that God fills all the world, meaning, someone who is a powerful king and dominates or is dominion over so much place, area, that's awesome. But that's removed. But not only that, but God also fills the world. In other words, he is ever present here, that we can comprehend, not beyond us, but within our world, that we can even appreciate how he animates the world, and therefore he is present through him animating the world in this world. And at the same time, he's not limited by that. He's encompassing all of the worlds. In other words, he's beyond that which I can comprehend.
Rabbi?
Yes.
There are very few people that are sensitive enough to sense God in this world, but there are people who are, faith that do sense that.
Yep. Well, that's what, actually, in the second part of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe will give us an appreciation of the power of Creator within creation, not beyond creation, but within creation, that we can actually have some kind of sense of God's presence within the creative world. So yeah, you're right. It's not so simple. That's why I said, a person in the room, or physical people, and it's much easier to sense their presence and act different, accordingly. Whereas God's presence is much more difficult. So you're right. He's giving here just the basic guideline. To fill in the blanks, that will be later on. We'll get that information or that teachings. Now, the important thing is over here, though, is what comes to next. That even though God transcends all of creation and is immanent and is found within creation at the same time, which is, a paradox, being here and being beyond here at the same time. Yet, all of that, the fact that God is the creator of everything, the higher worlds, this lower world, he literally puts that all aside. That's not what he's interested in. That's not his concern. That's not what he is about. What he does uniquely, he bestows his kingship upon in particular, the people of Israel, and then even more particularly on me, to such an extent that I'm obligated to say that the world was created just for me. For my sake, the world was created. Not that I could abuse the world, not that I could take advantage now because the world is mine. I could do whatever I want. No, on the contrary. The world was just created for me, that my next move, my next thought, speech, or action makes a difference because it was all created for me. That's how much. So God is creator, That's only, an expression of his outer will and not what he really wants. What he really wants is to be, that we should be, he should be a king over us. Then that, when I understand that, then that's what God wants, to be king over me. Then I'll do anything to serve him. It might be small, it might be large, it doesn't matter. Small little things, because that's what God wants. In other words, all of the angels above and all of creation, the animals, all of the birds and all of, the trees in the forest and everything. He puts that all aside because that's him as creator. But that's not him as king. We'll get more into that concept, what it means a king. Not now, but we'll get more into that. And with this, we say to ourselves, behold, God himself stands over me. The whole world is full of his glory. And not only that, and the whole world is full of his glory, his omnipresence, yet what's most important is that he is seeing me and scrutinizing me, searching me from the inside. Am I serving him as is fitting? When we have that sense that God is looking at me and saying, am I serving him as is fitting? That presence of God was going to bring you to a sense of awe or a sense of fear, because you're standing before God, before the King. When we meditate and think about this, what will that do? Obviously, we will behave differently because we're in the presence of God. We will think differently. We will speak differently. We will act differently. Again, I just want to emphasize, because there's not enough emphasis on this, it's not about punishing. It's not that God is punishing here. It's that God is present. Why is he present? In order to bring out the most in me, the best in me, the most powerful in me. And the most powerful in me is that sense of awe, sense of presence of God, that therefore I will really act and be a different person. Vilma, you wanted to say something?
So I noticed this is in all the prayers, and I don't, it's something that, because it's the prayers that speak to me in the way I understand it.
Right.
Elenu talks about that a lot. Elenu talks about the master of all, that is our duty to praise and acclaim, and
right.
There is no other, that we don't bend the knee and bow to anyone else but our supreme sovereign, our
right.
Holy One, and that he is everywhere.
Right.
And in truth, he's our only ruler. So that's what, the king of your heart means. There's no other human being in this world that can touch him.
Right.
Nothing in this world created. So you fear no man.
Right.
No woman, no creature, but God.
Very good. Yes. So in the prayers speak about it. And what we're doing over here is the Alter Rebbe is giving us a way that we could, before the prayer, kind of put ourselves in that frame, that when we are praying, those words reverberate in us. They're real. They're not, we're not just saying words. So that is exactly the idea. That when there's a sense that God is looking at me, that I should be the best me. Not looking at me to punish me, but like a loving father, a king that's loving, and that is looking at me in order that I should just act differently because of that. Because if he's not looking, right, what do we do when we want to do something wrong? Is anybody looking? You look this way, you look that way, and no one's looking. Okay, now I can act this way. But if someone is looking, then we don't act that way. So if God is looking and he's searching, a human is looking, they can only see what you're doing. But when God is looking, he is seeing inside of you to see if you are actually giving it your all. Are you truly devoting yourself in what you're doing, or are you just, trying to fool, um, who you're trying to fool? And that's a key over here that's very important. That's a key, There's nothing that, as the Rebbe Marash said, a fool who's trying to fool somebody, the only person that they're fooling is themselves.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So what are we trying to do over here is to have an awareness of the truth of that God is present, and I should be mindful of it. And even though I don't have it in my heart, maybe, but even I have it in my mind, that is called fear.
Rabbi,
Yes, Batya.
see that looks like she wanted to have something to say and maybe a question.
I'm sorry?
Marcy, it looks like she wanted to have.
Oh, okay. Oh, Marcy. So I'm sorry, I didn't notice. So let's invite Marcy up and go ahead, Marcy. Oh, okay. I'm looking here online. Any questions? Any questions that were not answered on Facebook, please repost them. I looked through and I thought I saw everything that I saw, but maybe I missed something. Okay. You know what we can do now? I know now that. There's a lot of things that we know now. Anybody want to share that? Please do.
I know that the greatest trick this world plays is having people believe that God is not present, but he really is. And so, if we delude ourselves into thinking that there is no God, or that God isn't somewhere not watching and knowing everything, then we can folly and do bad things. So we should live with the presence of God being there in our minds and in our hearts.
Very well said. Yeah, that is definitely the folly of this world, and it's the nature of the world. By the way, it's just the nature of things because of the concealment, and that's why divine service means getting beyond the human condition to be able to perceive a reality that's beyond that, and that we have to thank the Alter Rebbe tremendously in giving us that capability, because on our own it'd be very difficult. Marcy, did you want to?
She's not on stage, so if she wants to raise her hand.
Oh, okay. Okay, fine.
She can speak.
Yeah, no, we answered Tim's question earlier. Linda, I know now that the active Torah study expressed through the body of Kalipa, it needs to be transformed, to be brought into a holy place. To do so needs intent, but the hidden love in our heart, for it to ascend to the divine. Once it goes to the divine attributes, the light it produces is too powerful, but the coming of Mashiach, we will have that in this world, yes. Can, however, sweeten the severity that we may have to go through this world in the proper kavanah and mitzvahs. Excellent. Okay. So Jacqueline is asking, is fear avoiding humans from reaching others, even reaching God? Is fear avoiding humans from reaching others? I'm not certain I understand that. The fear of avoiding humans from reaching others, even reaching God. So, the fear that we're talking about over here of the presence of God is obviously a very positive and healthy one. There are kinds of fear that are very negative, and they come from the animal soul, not from the godly soul. This fear that we're talking about is of the divine soul, that the divine soul desires to be not to be disconnected. And in order to help not to be disconnected, when we meditate and think about the presence of God, then that will allow us to be connected and not be disconnected. That's of the divine soul. There is fear of the animal soul. The fear of the animal soul is the fear of no, I lost the word. Preservation. Fear of preservation. That is the basic fear of the animal, right? It wants to preserve its life. And that's what we do. We want to preserve our life. So therefore, if you insult me, then I feel my life is, my life is being threatened. I can feel that from my animal soul. It's being threatened because of your insult towards me. So I fight or flight in the preservation of my existence, right? Or I become very materialistic because I need all these things that I feel secure. I need all of these physical material things to feel secure. The godly soul doesn't need that. The animal soul needs that. And because of the fear the animal soul has that it may not be complete, and may not have everything it needs in order to be preserved, so then, we fight for every last, nickel and dime, so to speak, right? But that's all of the animal soul. So there is fear, that's not an unhealthy fear, and we have to recognize those fears where they're coming from, and recognize that that's not what I'm here for. I hope that explained, Jacqueline, your question. But that we're going to do in Tanya therapy when we get there. Eventually we're going to have Tanya therapy sessions where we can deal with all of this stuff in a therapeutic manner of all the questions and the issues that we go through. This is, what we're learning over here is the concepts and, the application in our personal lives and what we're going through. We will have that another time. All right, folks, this has been a marathon. I want to thank all the marathoners over here. I want to thank Davida, making sure I was on top of all the questions. Thank you. I want to thank all of you, actually. Vilma and Batia, helping along over here in Clubhouse. And this is amazing. We got through a marathon over here, and we're still standing. All right, folks. If you have any more questions or comments, you can leave it, and I'll try to, look through and get to it maybe for tomorrow, because we will continue tomorrow, God willing. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Thank you for all joining. Please share. Sharing is caring. Share the Alter Rebbe's teachings with others. Thank you.